Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, good morning, depending where in the world you are. Thank you so much for joining us today at Atlas Carbon Live. We're doing a tale of two farms, why on-farm due diligence is a non-negotiable. This is a really great topic, and I'm really grateful that everybody has joined us today to deep dive into some examples that we've seen on farm, different types of due diligence that we've run on two different properties and the results of those. So appreciate everybody streaming in. I can see some familiar names in the attendees. So thank you for joining us if we have spoken to you before. If you are new, thanks again for jumping on board, and we hope to be speaking to you in the future. I would like to introduce my co-host, Cole Phelan. How are you, Cole?
Well, thanks, Vic. It's great to be here, and thanks for taking the reins of this one. It's nice to be your sidekick today, and looking forward to the session.
Teamwork makes the dream work. You're not a sidekick. We're doing this in conjunction with each other. You are the Partnerships and Business Development Manager at Atlas Carbon. It was remiss of me to actually not introduce myself. My name is Victoria Lawrence. I'm the Senior Carbon Solutions Advisor here at Atlas Carbon. And our guest today is Rafe Ritchie. He's our Senior Pasture and Grazing Consultant. Welcome, Rafe.
Good afternoon, Vic. Good afternoon, hello, and good morning, and all those things to everyone joining us. Thanks for having me along, Vic. This is obviously what I do mostly is on farm, so this is a nice little conjunction of the work we do in-house and then the work we do on the farm. So lots of fun.
Yeah, I know a lot of your work is done outside, so I appreciate you making time at the desk today to to put this together and talk to everybody. I've heard some rumblings and seen some vision lately of snow not too far from you. Has that any flurries reached your way?
No snow hit us, but we could see it. We could see it. We're at Tamworth, a little bit west of Tamworth, and we could see it in the hills. Surprisingly, it wasn't that cold here, but we were very, very happy not to be a part of the New England tablelands and their snow. It closed a number of roads. It was quite amazing. Like they got a foot of snow, or 30 centimeters of snow at Bendemeer, which is not that high up the map. So yeah, it was rank, and now all that water has probably about to hit Narrabri, I think, and so those poor devils there are getting a bit wet in the feet. But we got a minor flood here in Tamworth, but no snow, thankfully. Just
Yeah,
a few grim days of weather.
yeah. Didn't weren't tempted to pull out the skis and make your way a bit further north?
No, well, the roads were closed. So
Right, of course. Sorry,
yeah,
yeah.
in Australia, I think if we get more than three centimeters of snow, we just start closing roads. We don't know what to do.
No, for sure.
But
Oh.
yeah, it was wild. But I did see I have friends up in those reaches around Walker and stuff, and someone had their skis out skiing across an incredibly boring looking, very flat slope, but they were skiing nonetheless, so they were very happy.
Well, I
It's
was going
funny,
to say,
funny you say that. Mate of mine up near Gyra had a phone call from the neighbour, and he thought he was going to be offering to do some feeding for him. He said, "Do you mind if we jump over the fence and pull the skis out?"
it's a very foreign concept to me being born and raised in Western Australia. We don't have snow, let alone elevation at all. So can't relate at all to what you guys are going through at the moment. But I just thought I'd quickly jump through our agenda for today. We will be talking about the reality of soil carbon project and due diligence being such a big part of that. I know if you've spoken to anyone or seen anything about Atlas Carbon, it's always forefront for us to make sure that due diligence is the key element to the carbon journey and making sure that there's a lot of transparency in that. So we'll talk a bit about that at the start between Cole and I. And then Rafe, you're going to jump into some examples today of some real numbers, some maps, what we can see from some early maps versus what we can see sort of down the track in our process a little bit further, and how two different farms ended up where they did based on the data that came back from that. And of course, Q&A. So at any point, please put in your questions. There's a question box within your Zoom screen that you'll be able to enter. There's also a comments box there for anything. If you've got snow stories of your own, chuck them in there. We're keen to hear anything that everyone wants to talk about today. So feel free. We'll make some time at the end to reach those. Anyway, for people that haven't been here before, Cole, do you want to kick off and have a bit of a chat about what we do here at Atlas Carbon and Maya Grazing?
Yeah, thanks, Vic. Those that have been around the traps have probably heard this and are familiar, but for those that aren't, about 10 years ago, I started at the bottom of the screen there. I was fortunate enough to be one of the team that we kicked off Maya Grazing, which is an application, software as a service that's on your phone, on the computer, all about optimizing grazing systems. It's tooling to support planning and forecasting to help better manage the risk of that's very part of the business that we're all in. So ultimately, it's about supporting people making earlier decisions to balance stocking rate and carrying capacity. Fast forward to about 3 years ago, we launched Atlas Carbon, because effectively, if you're doing those things which really are optimizing grazing systems, and happen to be on the right soils with the right scale and that trajectory of upward trajectory of management, then you're going to more than likely not only be improving your carrying capacity, but improving soil health. Now, we're now in the space, as we know, and the people on the webinar because of it, because you can start to get paid for the soil carbon uplift within those landscapes. So we work with graziers by specialising in the due diligence, and hence Rafe is here today to talk about that and the reason why it's so important to get on the ground. But really, it's about specialising in the how of making a soil carbon project successful, and it's all about grazing performance, which is our history and which we're supported with the data and the tools. So that's it in a nutshell. But effectively, this space is all about performance, and grazing performance is what we do.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary, Cole, and a good segue into talking about the reality of soil carbon projects. I know there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of confusion in the industry, and I think our job at Atlas, for a large part, is really to help people understand that and to wade through the copious amounts of information that there is in the industry. To be very clear, there are multiple methodologies in which producers can earn carbon credits, and what we focus on specifically at Atlas is about soil carbon, and that's within grazing systems. So it really is about understanding the property. So when we're talking about the reality of soil projects, we understand there can be both ends of the spectrum. There can be trepidation, and there also can be a lot of hype in terms of, there are big numbers getting about that people are talking about for what people can potentially earn. So what we want to really focus on is not worrying about the noise and focusing on individual properties. Every property is different. There is no one size fits all when it comes to carbon project, and it is very important to us to make this as customizable as we possibly can. And that requires gathering information and data sets from the property and really building a story around your land, your soils, your management. I mean, that's going to play a huge key as to you as a producer and how the project would actually roll out. So those are the things that we focus on at the forefront, and that we refine over the process. And that's not just us, it should be anybody who's looking at a soil carbon project. The importance of that is becoming more and more apparent as we learn more and more about soil carbon projects and this industry develops. And I think getting out on farm is a huge part of this. Do you want to sort of talk about this a little bit, Cole, in terms of the value of ground truthing? I mean, you've had your boots on a lot of properties, and you know that there just can be differences from one farm to the next over a fence, and that comes down to a lot of different factors.
Absolutely. More often than not, there's more variability within the single farm than even within a region. It's and you can't just throw assumptions out there that, because I'm a grazier and because I've got, decent rainfall, that I'm going to be successful in a soil carbon project. To your prior slide about, a lot of noise out there, I think there's been sort of a lot of oversimplification too. We're dealing with complex systems, and first and foremost, we have to keep production at the front of our minds, and what is the potential of a project on any particular grazing enterprise is going to be entirely dependent on so many factors, and to go into a project which is a big commitment, there's a lot of potential upside, but a lot of variables. So to really understand or to have the opportunity to be informed before making that commitment is so critical. The amount of projects that effectively are entered into without even having a teaspoonful of soil analysed to understand the existing cation exchange capacity, macro, micronutrients, let alone the existing soil carbon stocks from a surface level 0 to 30 through to the potential for deeper soil carbon sequestration and retention is largely being missed. So, would you buy a house without doing a pest and building report or knowing if there's white ants or not? It's to spend a few dollars. Not only can you be better informed from a production perspective, and that's the thing that drives the success, but the existing starting point. So yeah, I've banged on enough here, but it's all about really assessing the viability with the best possible information, and it's only that far away. It is possible to get an incredibly detailed analysis and reduce risk.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that we talk about when we do reference due diligence is getting an understanding of where you're at currently and does it actually stack up. But something that is a little bit missed in the conversation really is about setting yourself up for success in the project and how it actually influences the setup of your project. So when we're talking about due diligence and understanding your different zones, you were talking about, Cole, the variability within the farm, really getting a good handle of that and where that sits and being able to zone those areas out is going to greatly influence your baselining and setting up that project for success. If we're putting in areas that might actually in reality be not as well performing, we then pay for baselining that potentially might not really give us a good return. So we want to be as focused with our carbon estimation areas within a project as possible. And
that's a great point, Vic. Sorry, and I thought you were possibly going to move on to something else. So continue to cut me off and keep running with that. But that is such a critical thing. No doubt over time, the cost of sampling and baselining will go down, and we do believe that. However, the amount of projects that are actually being registered where the whole property is being registered, where it's more often than not, it's likely that the whole property may not be suitable for a soil carbon project, and you can't really determine that without actually getting on the ground and taking objective numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the same goes vice versa. If you're looking at areas that, not including that could be potentially a lot higher performing, and you say, I might just want to do these particular paddocks, and that's just based off your own knowledge of the place without getting any soil tests done, it's really important to actually ground truth a lot of these assumptions so that when I spend my dollars on development, seed inputs, pasture inputs, all these sorts of things, that it's actually going to give us a good return. And that's within a carbon lens, I suppose, of a project. We talk about production as well as the big focus here. And of course, productivity can be improved everywhere through different means. But when we do have this focus of a carbon project and looking at, well, what are the costs involved in that, it's got to pay for itself and it's got to make it worthwhile for you as a producer. And that's really one of the things that we focus on. I think the other thing as well, carbon projects are grazing projects. They really are about core productivity, and specifically at Atlas and our history with Maya grazing, and Cole, you talked about that. We've had 10 years of really good understanding between linking data and grazing outcomes and what is actually going to work when we're putting in the time on farm for the development of these grazing systems. How does that actually build carbon? And understanding the link between the two, it's inextricable. You can't do one without the other. And particularly when it comes to a project, these are 25 years. We need to be putting these in place that will last. And these are not quick carbon fixes. These are productivity first, and carbon comes as a cherry on top of that good grazing system. Would you agree with that, Cole?
Well, I'd be a silly man to disagree with anything that you say, Vic. But yeah, and this is it's a production play. people that we work with, both my grazing customers all around the world, or people entering into soil carbon projects with us, they know what business they're in. They actually know that they want to increase their productivity per hectare. They know that they've got variability on their property, and they're trying to understand, okay, this thing has to pay for itself. So to your point about, the different zones and so forth, you've got to be able to go down into that level of detail on, is this thing going to clean its face and then some? And so businesses that are willing to invest in CapEx, how do you optimize the distribution of those precious dollars to inform the best application of system setup and expenditure to not only get the production outcome, but overlaying a soil carbon project on top of that. So yeah, 100% agree. This is it's all about production, because this is about maximizing photosynthesis and doing that predominantly through grazing and optimizing biomass recycling. And having the numbers and the stats that we've built over the last 10 years with my grazing, we're in a very fortunate position to have one of the world's leading and largest grazing analytical databases. So when people come through the process to assess, is a farm visit warranted here, we benchmark them against some metrics which we know are critical to achieving that production outcome, which, if on the right soils, will correlate in a successful soil carbon project.
Now, I know you and I could sit here all day, Cole, but nobody came to listen to us waffle on. We've got our very patient superstar, Rafe Ritchie, who's about to take us through some data points. Have we still got you, Rafe, or have we lost you?
No, I've been drinking in, actually. I've been soaking it up. So I would like to raise one conjecture. No, I'm kidding. No, you guys have been absolutely smashing it, and everything you said is borne out on when we're on the blocks, on the farms. This is not a office versus the outdoors kind of situation here. The reality is we are looking to optimize farms that are being well run now, but maybe have some more levers to pull, and that's essentially what a soil carbon project does. It just pushes out and finds every bit of the envelope of your block to get it more productive, and every inch doing more. The cost of land now is, it's much better to make every inch of your farm sing than buy more farm. So that's very much a large part of what we do, and it's very much what you guys were just saying too. So all agree.
Yeah. And you do reference the office versus the outdoors. I know you're saying that's not the case with us internally, but that is what we're talking about at the moment when we are really talking about what are the limitations of the office or our desktop analysis, what we can do at a desktop level, and then how can we really amplify that and get some really good core data when it comes to soils, pastures, management, just having good conversations with these producers on farm to get the best understanding of these properties, so we're in a position to be able to recommend whether a soil carbon project would be a viable option. So you're in a very unique position, Rafe, that you have seen everything in terms of different states, different land types, different uses, or the whole spectrum. And I think one of the things that we really talk about is we will be very honest and transparent in our process to talk about ones that may not stack up, which is not always the outcome that people expect or even obviously want. So do we want to talk about this first farm here?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this one's in New South Wales. This is, to give everyone a context, obviously we've taken some names away just to make it all nice and anonymous. But the reality is this block is in range, is in the western side of the dividing ranges. So highly variable area. But on the flip side, more rain, temperate climate, cooler climate. So in the things that really make a soil carbon sequestration easier, lower temperatures, higher rainfall, good soils, and then management is the thing that actually makes those three things work. So in this case here, we had a pretty temperate climate, we had a pretty good rainfall, And we're looking here at this is the ASC mapping, or the Australian Soils Classifications. This is the metadata that soils are classified in Australia, and we see what looks to be a pretty consistent bit of soil. So this one mapped as from satellite mapping and stuff, mapped as a almost entirely soda sol block. For those of you who don't like those terms, that's effectively a clay, a heavy clay, one of the redder clays, and it's going to have a bit of salt in it. That's the sodic part. So it's now the reality is, on farm, the block didn't look anything like this. So unfortunately, my photography skills of the soil cores aren't great, but you can see the absolute difference between one on the left and one on the right. So if we'd just gone off the satellite data, we would have said the whole block's the same, and our variance would have been astronomical, because the reality is that they are not even the same categories of soil, as opposed to just variations within that category. So on the left there, my left anyway, we've got a block there that's, very sandy soils, quite hard, very low, low in everything, low in nutrition, low in carbon, and this is on a place that's been pretty well run. Okay, these guys aren't doing a bad job. These guys are pretty slick, but that is just the nature of, you can't change soil that much. Then we look on the right there, and we've got beautiful soils in a deposition area, and that's endless. I mean, that we could have gone down 5 meters there, and that clay would have just been blacker and lovelier and nicer. And we look at when we move down below those cores, we see the numbers, and there's cation exchange capacity is one of the critical factors when it comes to attaching soil carbon to your soil, or carbon to your soil, I should say. So if we look there, I can tell you that core on the right is the 29.7. That is, a pretty reasonable cation exchange capacity. So to put it in terms that people might equate, okay, Moree, cotton country can get to 45, 50, even 60. So those are obviously astronomical numbers for astronomical soils, but this is still a pretty strong soil. Anything above 15 is going to be able to do the job. So this really is a clear indication of a desktop appraisal told us the whole block was the same. Essentially, this block didn't stack up as a project because the proportion of that lighter, sandier soil was just too high, and we just didn't have enough of the nice, rich clays that can actually retain carbon. So all soils can sequester carbon, but it's the ones that can retain it during the dry periods that are the winners, and that's the problem here. So this obviously is one of the clearest indications we have of blocks we've been to, but I think it's a pretty telling image that we can have that much variety in what the desktop said should be the same, and that is proof, proof undeniable that you've just got to get on the block. As I said, in the end, this one didn't stack up. It wasn't that they couldn't sequester carbon and there wasn't capacity there. It was just that we take a pretty conservative approach, and the upside potential wasn't sufficient to cover the cost of a project to the measure that we like, which is a pretty serious upside.
And I guess that was sort of informed by other questions that we took once we had the physical samples, and then being able to model that out across the landscape. That sure, there were some of those stronger soils, but the area of it was far too small. And that's not to say that sometimes a smaller area may not still be okay, but you've got to then make some quantitative calls on what is the upside potential even in those soils that have got that potential, and that additional upside. Once you extrapolate that out volumetrically, that's when you've got to make a call on the economic viability of the project.
Yeah, absolutely, Cole. And I think the other thing too that is really important is that block is those managers are slick. They're doing a good job. So, a large part of a soil carbon project is the management, and If there's some upside potential there, that's also a positive. If the guys are already doing a pretty slick job, then that makes it tougher to find upside potential. Thank you, Vic. This one's really interesting. So this is in sort of table once again range country, New South Wales. Really variable. As you can see, all the mapping says it's really variable, and it was, up and down, up and down. Some very strong soils and some weaker soils. This is right actually in the middle of the dividing range. It's a very unique block, and it's unbelievably good soils, and then some pretty lower order soils too. So what the big point here that I want to make is my arrow I drew was far too fine. But if you look at that soil core on the right and go across to where it comes from in what can only look like dental floss I've used anyway, it's mapping a very large area of lower order tenosol. And that isn't the case. That area was very small. So once again, the satellite data wasn't good enough, wasn't up to the job as being accurate enough for a good model. And then if we look down to the left, that's a stratification that we've done, and that shows areas of commonality. And if you sort of push the two together and work out where you picked up that soil core from, what the soil mapping said, and then what our stratification said was, our initial stratification, which was informed by the satellite data, it wasn't strong enough either. So it was important there that we get it. So our final stratification looked much different to that one you're looking at there on the left, which is actually what then drives the mapping for the project. So it's really important that once we get all that data, we feed it back into the modeling, and that usually drastically changes the way the country is mapped and which areas fall into projects and which areas are grouped together as well, because that's very, very important. If you want to flick to the next slide there, Vic, thank you. So that's just further to the point there that I've said that the potential of this block is variable. What we found though was the stronger areas were extremely high potential, and the weaker areas were smaller than the mapping would suggest. So you put those two things together, and this becomes a very strong project. So this one we went to thinking, okay, this is something to have a look at. This is a reasonable project, reasonable potential. We came away with really big potential on this one, and I think that what's interesting here is when we look at, we've got the cation exchange capacity, which is the soil's ability to hold that carbon in very rough terms. Let's not have a debate on soil science there. But if we actually move down then to the corresponding carbon stock numbers, that's what's quite interesting, is that if we look there isn't a massive variance in the actual top end stock of these soils. What is big though is the potential, the upside potential. So we haven't got that, unfortunately, because that is a little bit commercial in confidence. But what we can say is that on the stronger areas, the upside potential was significantly more than the carbon stocks currently. And what we could see in the poorer areas, or the lower potential areas, the upside potential was much closer to the existing carbon stocks, which obviously just shows that there isn't always the best. The return on investment there wouldn't be as strong, I suppose is what I'd say. And if we just slide down, I think I've actually overshot myself. We slide to the next slide, please, Vic. We get to what I was just talking about. I've actually sort of overrun myself, but the big difference is the carbon stocks there. And if we look at the numbers and look at the purity, the purity that gives us is, we have carbon 44 tons per hectare in some of the weaker country and 108 in the stronger country. The reality is the country with 108, which models as being, a higher carbon stocks already, has way more potential than the 44, and that's because of just the inherent nature of that soil. But if you just went off the mapping, off the SOC mapping, you would see 44, and you would think, gee, we've got the sky's the limit. But we know that because we've mapped it better, we've modeled it better, and we've tested it, that there's a big difference in what can be achieved in those two soil types. So this one, if you look at this block and the different areas, I can tell you that in rough terms, about 2/3 of this property went in, or no less than about 50% of this entire property went into a project, because we just could not justify the return on capital for the other 50%. So not because it couldn't sequester carbon, it just couldn't sequester enough to really make it pay. And I think that's the important lesson here. Ironically, the 50% that was high potential was extremely high potential. So it made up for any kinds of reductions in areas because of the high potential of the stuff that we managed to track down by getting on farm and getting a really clear understanding of management, soil chemistry, and the environment, and then also the future plans of the operation.
Yeah, that's such a great overview, Rafe. I think it's so important to be able to put these real numbers towards, first of all, our assumptions and prove ourselves right or wrong, because what we're looking at a desktop level, we are just very focused on understanding, is this the truth? And you really can't understand that until you get boots on the ground, until you start digging up soils, looking at pastures and talking to the producers as to what they're seeing on their place as well, because every grazier understands their property through and through as to how they've performed in terms of what's grown, how the cattle have performed, but not always understanding these numbers that's coming out of the soil test data. So we bring that level of extra scrutiny when it comes to what is really underneath the surface and putting that together to create this bigger picture and really understanding, what is the potential for a project, because it is a big undertaking and we want everyone to be as well as informed as they possibly can going into something like this. So you can make a decision. Did you have any, I can see you have some comments, Cole, that you might want to add there. I can see you gearing up.
Yeah, look, it just makes me think of just so many, projects where, at that high course desktop level, how we use that is really to create a context and a line of inquiry where we engage further with the producer to say, no one wants to go and be spending money for no good reason, but really a desktop analysis does have a place, but we really use it as a starting point to then build some more context to justify, is it worth spending some dollars on doing this on-ground analysis? Because it's not within anyone's interest to be just running around the countryside with rigs taking holes and digging holes and pulling cores and taking pasture samples and getting lab results, etc. But it has its place. But would we as a business back a project in just on the desktop analysis? No, absolutely not, for very good reason. And I think Rafe's examples here have given some fantastic insight to that. It also reminds me of a webinar that we ran 6 or 8 months ago or so on a project where down near Goulburn, the webinar is online there, where we weren't saying at all that this property is not going to sequester carbon, but the overall analysis was, you need to hang on to this carbon to get you through the dry times. This is to be able to cumulatively build up soil carbon over years and be paid for that. The risk was just too high. Rafe, you're on that particular trip too, and I know that we're sort of getting to the Q&A now, but did you have anything that you might add about that one out down near Goulburn?
Yeah, once again, those guys are slick operators doing a good job, and in no way is it any aspersion on the management of the block. They were doing a really good job on the block. So the assumptions drawn there are, okay, maybe some upside has been achieved already, and then you cannot lie to chemistry, and the reality is that we know mineral bound organic carbon is the one that hangs around during the dry periods, and if you do not have enough spots on the mineral or cation exchange, cation places on the minerals, you can't hold on to it. So and people will know that just anecdotally by looking at soils and stuff, and when it gets dry, some of those soils that are more sand based and stuff just lose their organic matter, and you can see it in a drought. So that's the that is the nature of those soils, and often they're in high rainfall areas, so it gets covered up, but when it turns dry, it exposes all those things. And I think the other thing too about doing a lot of this on-farm stuff is that it does then form a very strong model for the baseline mapping, and that baseline mapping in a project is the source of truth for your project for the next 25 years. So if that's done poorly, you suffer the consequences of that every measuring event for the next 25 years. So it isn't just about it isn't only that we're not, that some places don't stack up and some places do, and some areas in the farm don't. It's also if you do have a project that is set up on a poor baseline map, you then are effectively giving away credits every crediting event for the next 25 years. And that is, just inexcusable.
Yeah, Sue Zorgel, many people here may be familiar with Dr. Sue Zorgel, awful amount of work in the soil carbon space for many years, made that point. You've got a few weeks ago when I was down in Melbourne on a panel, and she was talking about you have to live with that. So, just she was reiterating the importance to get this right, and the reason why we get on farm to do this on-ground analysis is to validate the potential, and it obviously, if it is viable, then it gives you a head start on being able to optimise that baselining activities once you're in a project. We're just about to move on from the Q&A as we're sort of running close on time here, but we've got one come in here. Amy, thanks. I'll just read it for the first time as I see it. I'm here today to ask if you guys have seen any successful soil carbon projects for mixed farm cropping in rotation with pasture in low rainfall environment. I am from the wheat belt in WA. Vic and Rafe, well, Vic is actually based in WA, and interestingly enough, Vic and Rafe did go and do a farm visit in WA, and where this wasn't even anonymised and used as an example on the screen. It'd be good to talk to that one. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it was it your first time west, Rafe?
Yeah, first time across the plain.
And of course, you loved it. Love the wheat belt now. Favorite part?
No, it was fascinating. Fascinating production that is achieved by Western Australians in what to us East Coasters look like, lesser soils, and just older, just very old soils. I mean, you can pick up rock there and tell it's an extremely old rock. And the thing is, look, carbon is put, if you want the really rough terms, carbon is put down by growing roots. So the longer you can have growing roots in the soil, the more carbon gets put down. That's the very, very rough way of putting it. So in a mixed farming enterprise, as long as you reduce the amount of time of bare soil, then you are increasing the amount of time carbon can be put in there. So once again, it comes down to management. We know we've seen different blocks that have mixed farming enterprises on them and still achieve those gains. The reality is, the fastest way to put it down is a well-managed perennial pasture, because you've just got growing roots there for the maximum amount of period that the rainfall allows for. But it doesn't mean that those things are insurmountable. It just means it's another hurdle to manage. I think that's the most important thing with all this is there's nothing good or bad or up or down. It's just that's a problem you have to manage, and it usually ends up with if you want to extract things using annual plants effectively, you are going to slow the rates of sequestration, because you're reducing the time period that growing roots are in the soil. So the ones we've seen over there, the places we've seen over there, very much annual cropping, fodder cropping based. So just had that handbrake on it. The country we saw over there and those few blocks we saw and stuff, Vic, they were borderline cases. Now, I wouldn't say that they weren't viable. They weren't strong prospects due to the conservative nature of the way we run the numbers. We don't want to get involved in projects that aren't home runs, because it's a long project. It's a long-term thing, and it's a big commitment to the landholder. So we like to have full confidence that this is going to work. So once again, unfortunately, because I don't know where that block in the wheat belt is, I can't speak with any more confidence than that. Vic, you might know a bit more about different areas of the wheat belt that I didn't see.
Yeah, I think in general we do have a sandier base over here. I mean, we're nicknamed sand gropers for a reason. There's a fair amount of sand over here, and I think that, like you said before, it's what really drives the innovation of WA producers. We are working with what is, in all honesty, a lower nutrient base, and so we do have to work hard for that productivity. So yeah, as much as we can sort of speculate as a whole, like we've talked about all throughout, when we are talking about perennial cropping systems, we really have to focus on understanding the numbers a bit further. I'm happy to have a chat with you about that, Amy, at a later date. And I just wanted to we had another question about rainfall as well and the influence of rainfall. One of the things we have referenced already is our conservative nature, and that brings into account really accounting for not if a drought happens, but when it happens. I mean, these are 25-year timeframes we're looking at, so we are conservative, knowing that it will happen. Do you want to just talk a little bit about sort of rainfall bands that we sort of look for, Rafe, and the contribution to biomass and that being the key driver, really?
Yeah. So it's in Australia, this is a very rough term, but let's run with it. Rainfall goes up and the soil quality goes down a bit. There's a few pockets that you places like Ebor and that kind of stuff, which are black soil and 80 inches of rain, but that's the anomaly. Normally soils will get soils are very, very strong. Some soils are very, very strong when the rainfall is getting below that 650 mil sort of thing. And then as the rainfall gets over 650 mil, generally the soils drop off, temperature drops off, so that's positive too. So what that all sort of boils down to is that you, in really rough terms, and I'm sure that the soil scientists will have a crack at me here, but this is the way that I perceive it. If you think of it, fungus puts down carbon. It's not doesn't, but let's just run with that. And if you think of the environments that fungus like to grow in, it's consistent, it's moist, it's got and a good soil that can hold the carbon. So whenever you change that, you're going to change the amount of time that carbon can be sequestered in the year. So when we talk about rainfall, we need, there is an amount there is a level that has to be achieved, but 450 mils is sort of, there's alarm bells below 500 mils and there's alarm bells screaming below 450. But if the soils are extremely strong, then that changes that argument. So it always comes down to a mixture of things, and it's a mixture of soils, it's a mixture of climate, it's the mixture of rainfall, and it's the mixture of management. That when you mush all that together, that's what actually makes a project. So we do projects in areas that are I think 390 or 380 or something average rainfall, but very good soils, slick operators, and a real commitment to managing the perennial pastures. So that's that's how that thing works. And then when you get into the softer areas or the higher rainfall areas, then you just have more buffer. But you then usually have smaller places with less scale, so they have to get everything right. So it's always that trade-off. But I think that the rainfall has been sort of it's been given the number one tick as being the thing that really matters in soil carbon projects, and I think it's unfair to give it that much bias. I think you've always got to mix it in with the four factors that really make one stack up, and the biggest part of that, in all fairness, is the people. It's do these people want to really commit to making a strong project and commit to a bit of change, because you're being paid to change. But that change comes with high production, as one of our banners says, more grass, more cows, more carbon. And that is the truth. When we do the modeling, I know I can't sort of say the numbers, but I can tell you that we nearly always, 9.5 out of 10 of the projects we model, the first thing that you notice is that there's an increase in production, an increase in the stocking rate during a project, because we're just making more grass, and then when you make more grass, you make more carbon. So I mean, those are very coarse terms, and I'm sure There's some keyboard warriors will have a crack at me at those, but which they'd be right about. But they work for me in the way I think about things, and that is that it's the cycling of it's just like a garden. If you go to your garden and you get vegetable patch, very few people these days don't mulch their vegetable patch to retain moisture, and they don't. No one ever goes there and strips out the broccoli plant at one time. They take bits off and let it regrow. And it's much the same as in your farm. You know, there's not a great deal of difference. It's just the scale's bigger.
Yeah, that's
Quick question on just there was just a general question, just what's a farm visit cost? You know, is it a single cost or is it different for every farm? It's not a line item which we put margin on, so we're really about delivering these farm visits and project viability analysis, delivering that as lean and close to its cost as possible. And you know, quite often we're able to cobble together several farm visits and analysis in a region, and when we can achieve those additional efficiencies, we pass those on. So anyone on the call that wants to really understand, well, one, if you're on the call and you know that you're actually a producer that knows where they're going as a business and you want increased productivity, and therefore does this soil carbon space provide essentially another enterprise to stack onto something that you committed to a path of success with, then we can work out, okay, let's do the viability analysis on, is it worth getting onto ground, and be able to accurately quote that up for you. But what's involved on a farm visit includes Rafe et al. Going to site with that rig that you can see on the screen there, typically taking between 15 and 20 samples down to 1.2 meters. We also take plant tissue samples as well. They go away to the lab. We do a full agronomic analysis on it. We do an additional analysis on the production system, understanding more about your business, where you're actually heading with your core business model, and present that back a few weeks after the visit to actually say, okay, well, here's the reasons why we say it's viable. Here's the break even as well. What sort of carbon sequestration rates that you need to achieve in the different zones for this thing to wash its face. All done with very conservative numbers, because that's just how we roll. Is this thing has to kind of work and stack up worst case scenario for us to have the confidence to say this works and is a good project to consider for producers. Vic, I'll leave it with you now.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Cole, and thanks everybody for submitting your questions. And I know we have got through a lot of information today. Really appreciate you taking us through the data, Rafe, and you joining me as well, Cole. Just to wrap up, we'll talk about what's coming up next for Atlas Carbon. We are launching a podcast, which is new for us, called the Stockyard Sessions. So keep an eye out for that if you're getting our communications. We will bring you that very soon when we launch it, and it will cover a whole range of topics: soils, pastures, carbon, grazing, the whole shebang. So looking forward to that. We do have a presence at AgQuip again this year. I know Cole and Rafe, you're both heading there in Gunnedah from the 19th to the 21st of August, not too far away. You'll find us in the Ag Smart Connect Pavilion. So please come by and catch up with the team. Cole, you're presenting, you're doing Know and Understand Your Farm's Soil Carbon Potential. So that'll be on 2 p.m. on the Wednesday, the 20th of August. We're also having another field day. Do you want to talk about that, Cole, a little bit? I know we had a recent one that you attended at Coventry.
Yeah, Coventry, out near between Tamworth and well, not terribly far down the road from Rafe, actually. But that was an amazing day. We were able to spend time on ground with the producer to learn about the process that they went through to understand the viability of a project through to the registration of the project. And now we're taking this up to Bingra with the McMurtry's there on the 30th of September. The information about registering for that event will be coming out in due course, so stay in touch with the socials and so forth. It's free, and Rafe will be there as well. We'll have the rig there. We'll have Bart Davidson there talking everything agronomically as well as production-wise. and learn more about the story of the McMurtry's up at there. So, you know, if there's any more questions, feel free to send them through to any one of us, or through Facebook or whatever. We can get through with any details. Vic, what did you want to do to wrap things up?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight to everyone, if they are keen to start the process, the first step is our free cost benefit report. So that is the desktop assessment, which really helps us to give you an idea of what it would look like if we came out on farm. Is it viable from a desktop assumption at the first point of call, and then going down the line from there, where you can make decisions at each stage of that as you gather more information towards a soil carbon project. There is a link that we've put in the chat there if you are keen to fill in that questionnaire. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, just some high level information about your property, and then Rafe will do the assessment on the desktop, and either Col and I will be in touch to discuss that with you as well. So again, appreciate both of you joining me, Col and Rafe, and appreciate everybody on the call. And if you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to get in touch with us through our website, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all the channels, and appreciate both of your time this afternoon, gentlemen.
Thank you, Vic. Absolutely loved it. Good way to spend the day.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks, Rafe. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.